thanks very much for joining us today on this webinar where we will be presenting our plans for the proposed Horton Solar Farm. So I'm Chloe and I'm the Community Liaison Manager and Project Developer here at Aura Power. I'm also joined by Chris, who is our UK Development Manager, and Claire, who is our Planning Consultant at Engina. So due to the ongoing pandemic, we've chosen to offer this online platform as well as presenting our plans in person at Wimpole Victory Hall on the 20th of October. So both offer an opportunity to learn more about the proposal and ask any questions. We're also happy to have any separate discussions, so please do not hesitate to contact us. Before we go into the proposal itself, I just want to explain to you how this webinar will work. So we'll take about 30 minutes presenting the plans and then open up the virtual floor for any questions you may have for us to answer. So your microphones are muted for the session, but you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can type your question for us to then answer out loud. So we'll only be answering questions once we have presented our plans, so please feel free to type your question at any time during this session. However, I would advise waiting until the end just in case your question is covered in our presentation. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available to watch again on our website. If you are watching the recorded version and have a question that has not been addressed, please do contact us. We'll also make the presentation slides available to download from our project page website. So the purpose of this webinar is to present our initial plans, to understand local views, concerns and suggestions, and incorporate the feedback into our final layout that we will then submit to East Devon District Council. We would therefore like to ask you to complete a short feedback form after the webinar, which will be sent round following this session. Okay, so who is Aura Power? So we are a renewable energy developer. We're based in Bristol and were founded in 2013. We have around 30 staff in total and a dedicated UK team, which Chris and I are part of. And we have numerous utility scale solar farms and battery storage sites in development, not just in the UK, but also in the Republic of Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Spain, Canada, the US and Lithuania. So we are a joint venture partner of IB Vote. They are an engineering firm that's built over 1 gigawatt of solar farms worldwide and develops projects on a global scale. So that equates to around over 3 million solar panels with over 80 solar farms of varying sizes, of which more than half are situated in the UK. So with the experience and financial backing of a global company like IB Vote, we have the capability and financial security to see a project all the way through its development process to construction and then on to operation. As a responsible developer, our remit is to develop the solar farm design whilst engaging with the local community to help shape our plans, which we will then submit to East Devon Council. If approved, IB Vote will then construct and operate the solar farm once it's built. Okay, why solar? As we all know, we are in a climate and ecological emergency, and it is important to recognise why solar can play such an important role in the future of the energy sector and our environment. In June 2019, the government became the first in the world to set a legally binding target for net zero emissions by 2050. Just last week, the Prime Minister announced a target to completely decarbonise the electricity grid by 2035. In a few weeks, the UK hosts the COP26 Climate Summit, regarded as the most significant climate event since the 2015 Paris Agreement, and an important opportunity to demonstrate global climate leadership. The latest landmark climate report from the UN, released in August, underlined the importance of taking urgent action to tackle climate change. As we transition to a net zero economy, electricity demand is forecast to increase threefold due to the move away from fossil fuel-based heating and transport. Solar power is proven to be the cheapest form of new electricity generation available, and government policy states we will need to build 3 gigawatts of new solar every year to achieve our decarbonisation targets. We've already seen a substantial increase in wind and solar generation, with renewables outpacing fossil fuel generation for the first time last year. Furthermore, as large-scale developments in the UK are no longer supported by subsidies, this helps to reduce energy prices for everyone. The importance of this has been underlined by the recent gas price hike, It also allows us to become more self-sufficient as a country and less reliant on energy from overseas. East Devon Council has declared a climate emergency and set a target to become carbon neutral by 2040. Solar farms like this can help meet this vital challenge. As well as generating clean, renewable energy, this solar farm will enrich local biodiversity, continue the use of agriculture via sheep grazing, and restore the soil to an even better condition than during its previous use under intensive farming, after the solar farm has been decommissioned. This solar farm will have a capacity of up to 49.9 megawatts, which will generate enough electricity to power the equivalent of approximately 12,000 typical East Devon homes or 18,000 electric cars, and save around 11,500 tonnes of CO2 from entering the atmosphere each year. As you can see from the map here on the screen, our proposed site is located about 9 kilometres from Exeter, over 700 metres north-east of the village of Wimpole. This part of the UK offers some of the best irradiance levels in the UK, and this means more solar energy can be generated here than in most other areas of the UK. The fenced area of the solar development itself covers approximately 50 hectares of land, with a significant amount also used for biodiversity enhancements, which we'll talk about a bit later on. The land is owned by 4 landowners, all looking to diversify their land use, as farming in the UK is becoming increasingly challenging through more unpredictable weather and market conditions. While some of the land is currently used for growing crops, it is not classed as best and most versatile agricultural land and is mostly subgrade 3B. During the lifetime of the solar farm, the land can continue to be used for food production with sheep grazing, as much of it already is. Furthermore, as the fields will be left fallow, the soil will benefit from being rested and improve its natural long-term fertility. Finding a suitable site for a solar farm can be very difficult, as there are many constraints that need to be sensibly considered and balanced. Finding sufficient capacity on the electricity grid is one of the most difficult challenges. As the electricity grid becomes increasingly more saturated with the increasing demand for renewable energy generation, securing a grid connection, as we have done here with Western Power, is becoming increasingly challenging, particularly with no curtailment, meaning that all of our power is expected to be exported onto the grid, unlike in many cases. The land is largely well hidden, assisted by existing vegetation and topography, with limited nearby visual receptors. The site also benefits from having the potential to accommodate additional screening and mitigation measures, such as additional tree belts, hedgerows and ponds, which will also add to net biodiversity gain. That being said, we have invited nearby residents with potential views to engage with us constructively to help shape our design. So, as well as the secured uncurtailed grid connection and the suitability of the land, we believe this site is also suitable for a number of other reasons. So there are good levels of existing vegetation with an ability to screen further through the tree and hedgerow planting. The landscape is also suitable as it has no landscape designations. There are also no designated heritage assets in close proximity, no ecological designations or in close proximity. There are overhead lines on site and nearby, and also opportunity to boost biodiversity. I'm now going to pass over to Chris, who will speak about what makes up the solar farm and the design.
Thank you, Chloe, and good evening, everybody. So what makes up a solar farm? As you might imagine, there are a number of different components. Probably most importantly is the photovoltaic panels. PV panels are set out in rows with enough space between and underneath them for sheep to graze. Solar technology is advancing rapidly, and we'll be using south-facing fixed-tilt bifacial panels, which allow higher efficiency in converting sunlight to solar energy. The panels will have a lower edge of a minimum of 0.7 meters high and a maximum height of 3 meters. Between each row, there will be a minimum gap of 2 meters. This will enable the land to be grazed underneath throughout the lifetime of the project. In addition to the panels, there'll also be fencing, which will predominantly be for security purposes. Again, this will be approximately 2 meters high and will be styled as a traditional deer fence located around the perimeter with space for small mammals to pass through. There'll also be access tracks, and some new access tracks will be built, though we will endeavour to use existing access tracks and hedgerow gaps where possible. New access tracks would have the appearance of typical vernacular farm tracks with a crushed stone surface and will be 4 meters in width. The tracks would be allowed to grass over in time, thus allowing rainfall penetration and reducing their visibility. Inverters are located underneath the panels and convert power from direct current to alternating current. There'll also be transformers, which are used to step the voltage up so that it can be distributed onto the grid network. This allows for a more efficient transfer of energy across the grid network. Additionally, there will be storage units which contain spare parts. These will be located in the vicinity of the substation. Perhaps it's important to mention that there will be no security lighting when the solar farm is operational. The only lighting that may be in place will be during construction. However, as construction will mainly take place during daylight hours and is likely to be in the summer, lighting requirements will be minimal. Additionally, there'll be a substation. This will be where we connect into the grid network that feeds into the overhead line. The compound will contain a number of electrical infrastructure components and will be surrounded by a security fence. There'll also be a temporary construction compound. This will be a temporary area within the site for construction deliveries and site and welfare facilities. This will prevent vehicles from congesting the road. Additionally, there'll be cables which will connect the panels to the transformers and then onto the substation immediately to the east of the site. All cables will be located underground. The next slide, please, Clay. Thank you. So this is an indicative design that you can see on your screen. And as you can see, the panel arrays cover around half of the total site and will only disturb a very small proportion of the ground, typically less than 1%, as it is only the posts which are pile driven into the ground for the panels to sit on top of. So this allows plenty of space for sheep to graze safely beneath them. The grass can still grow underneath the panels on a UK solar farm, despite the misconception that the shade prevents it from doing so. And indeed, the panels can afford the sheep some protection from bad weather and shade in sunny weather. The substation at this site is located to the north of the solar site. This is where we connect the electricity into the grid to supply clean energy to your homes. Its siting is away from the public footpaths and will be largely hidden from view. We will be using monocrystalline silicon-based solar panels, which have up to 96% recycling efficiency. The operational period of the solar farm would be 40 years. Once the end of the operational period is reached, the solar farm will be decommissioned and the land returned back to its former state. We believe it is likely to be in a better state than it was before the solar farm was installed, with more trees, hedges, and wildlife. There will also have been much less pesticides and fertilizers sprayed on the land during this time. In addition to the solar panels and associated infrastructure, the proposal will include a number of ecological and landscape enhancements, such as new hedgerow planting, species-rich grassland and wildflowers, woodland and scrub areas, and the creation of a new pond. We will retain all existing hedgerows other than where access is required, and trees in and around the site, and allow hedgerows to grow for screening purposes. The improved grassland beneath and around the panels allows us significant gains in biodiversity. Wildflowers will be sown to further boost biodiversity and attract much needed pollinators to help tackle the ecological crisis. Buffers are included to protect existing on-site ecological features such as ponds, hedgerows, and trees. The northern perimeter is proposed for a new woodland and scrubland area. The scrubland trees such as young whips of hawthorn and blackthorn will provide a dense habitat for a variety of species, and the taller growing trees such as oak will offer height for assisting with screening from the northern part of the footpath. The footpath which runs along the western part of the site and through the northern part of the site will be retained. These footpaths will be retained with a width of 20 meters, as well as offering information boards to educate users about climate change, solar developments, wildlife, and renewable energy. We are considering planting hedgerows either side of the footpath, which in time will screen the panels from view, while still retaining the openness of the wider landscape. We'll have a closer look at this area in a few slides' time. It should be noted that as solar farms are very quiet, we do not predict any adverse noise effects on homes nearby. We would also be including beehives and bat boxes and welcome any members of the local beekeepers associations to engage with us to ensure our biodiversity efforts are maximised. So next slide, please, Chloe. Thank you. So these next few slides show the site from a few nearby viewpoints. We have agreed 13 viewpoints in total with the Council's landscape officer in reference to the zone of theoretical visibility, which you can currently see on your screen. For the purpose of this consultation event, we will be showing the most impactful viewpoints nearest the site, but the full suite of photographs will be submitted with our planning application in due course. The black dot in the middle of the plan shows the location of the solar farm, and the different shadings show the degree of visibility in the surrounding area. This does not take into account the effects of screening from existing or proposed vegetation or buildings, and so can be considered a worst case scenario. The green indicates the most visibility, and the pale yellow being only slight visibility. The white areas indicate where it is not visible at all. As this webinar is intended to gain feedback on our initial proposal, we have not yet included interpretations of the solar farm with proposed mitigation. So please note that the next images you see are worst case scenarios that do not include any tree or hedgerow planting. We would therefore be grateful for your feedback on suggestions for tree and hedgerow planting. We will then model images with any such tree planting and will share these once they are complete. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this viewpoint is taken from the road at the southern part of the site that runs from Wimple to Tallerton, about 90 metres from the edge of the development. To re-stress, the photo at the bottom of the screen is anticipated to be the worst case scenario and does not incorporate any new tree planting or indeed the growth of the existing hedgerows over time. Indeed, to provide a fully worst case baseline, these photographs were taken at the very start of spring this year, so when the hedges are at the lowest and trees not in leaf. With mitigation included, the visual impact will be reduced. We are also considering planting a row of trees to the left part of your screen to further soften the vista. Next slide, please, Claire. Thank you. So this viewpoint image is taken from the footpath that runs through the northern part of the proposed site, looking north. We have left a very wide corridor to retain openness for footpath users, which also allows for a reduced impact on the wider landscape in the first few years after the solar farm is built. We are considering planting a hedgerow along either side of this footpath, just in front of the fence line, which in time will screen the solar panels from view. If you are a user of this footpath and would prefer to see hedgerows planted here, please let us know using the Q&A button. Next slide, please. Thank you. This viewpoint is taken from the same footpath a bit further north, looking back towards the solar farm, approximately 125 metres away. Again, this interpretation shows the worst case scenario before any proposed landscaping has been established. Here, we are proposing to plant a woodland and scrub area on the inner boundary of the tree line you can see. This will, in time, soften the visual impact from this part of the site, as well as enhancing biodiversity.
Right, I'll be talking about construction and biodiversity. So as you can see on your screen here, the construction of the solar farm will take over a 4 to 6 month period, likely during the spring and summer months. If consented, we would likely start construction in 2023, but we will notify the local community well in advance. The route shown here is an indicative route of the A30 via Fairmile and Newtown. The proposed route will be fully inspected before it is agreed with the Council's highway agency. HGV movements will only happen outside of peak times, and a contact number will be made available for any residents who have any concerns over this period. Residents along the route in the vicinity of the solar farm will also be notified in advance of construction. Where possible, we would use the existing field access tracks to reach areas of panels further within the solar farm site, and compacted gravel will be used where existing tracks are not adequate for HGVs. A traffic management plan will be implemented before construction and agreed with the Council's Highways Authority. Most construction traffic will arrive on site in the first few weeks of construction, after which the number of HGVs will reduce significantly. As a solar farm requires little maintenance, after construction there will be minimal traffic going to the site, likely through a small van or car. We are aware of another nearby solar farm in the development area and will work with the planning authority to minimise cumulative impacts, including construction traffic, should they both be approved. Next slide, please, Chloe. A recent study has shown that the UK has lost nearly half of its biodiversity since the Industrial Revolution. That's more biodiversity loss than any G7 country and is the worst 10% globally. We've also lost a staggering 97% of wildflower meadows since the 1930s. Political leaders are starting to take action and have committed to reversing biodiversity loss by 2030. There is an abundance of evidence showing that the maintenance practices of solar farms can significantly improve local biodiversity by providing habitats for and food for wildlife. This is not only due to there being less intervention on the land compared with when land was farmed with the use of pesticides and fertilizers, but also due to the measures developers like Aura are putting in place to promote biodiversity. As the panels sit on piles, there is minimal disturbance to the ground, which allows the grass to continue to grow and the ability for sheep to graze beneath them. Arable fields can be converted to species-rich pasture and so acting as a stable store of carbon, a dual benefit to combat climate change and boost biodiversity. As the fields are left fallow for the life of the solar farm, the soil will be kept healthy, boost carbon sequestration, and after the solar farm has reached the end of its life, it can be removed with up to 96% of it recyclable. The land will then be returned to its previous state or even better than before. We will build the panels in infrastructure around existing hedges and trees. Vegetation removal will be minimal and only if needed for access. The fence will allow for small mammals to cross the site. The arable land within the development will be converted to grassland with wildflowers sown across the site, allowing substantial gains in biodiversity. Managed scrubland and pond creation will also increase wildlife habitats. Woodland would also be enhanced through management such as the inclusion of rotational coppicing to enhance the understory. This will greatly benefit local wildlife. A full biodiversity net gain calculation will be submitted with our application once we have finalised the layout and mitigation proposals. A recent study by the Solar Trade Association discovered that some solar farms had up to 6 times more pollinators than adjacent fields without solar panels on. With this in mind, there is opportunity here to install beehives, and if this is something you might be interested in helping us with, then we'd love to hear from you. Next slide, please, Chloe. We'll be producing a landscape and ecological management plan. This will ensure the biodiversity gains are maximised throughout the lifetime of the solar farm. The plan, or LEMP, will specify things such as where and how existing vegetation will be enhanced, the density of new meadow, hedges and trees, the species mix for the various habitats, how habitats will be protected during construction, and how habitats will be maintained through the project. The plan will be agreed with East Devon District Council and will outline the management regime of the solar farm. Progression of the habitats will be monitored annually and reports will be submitted to the council. The LEMP will be regularly reviewed and adapted if necessary to ensure the biodiversity aims are met. Next slide, please, Chloe. The next couple of slides are a summary of the environmental assessments undertaken so far. We've undertaken a screening exercise with the council who have determined that the development does not require an environmental impact assessment. This, however, does not detract from the extensive environmental work that has already and continues to take place. This includes, in terms of ecology, there are no ecological designations on site, and those in the wider area have been considered in determining the appropriate scope of surveys. We've undertaken a number of ecological surveys over the past year, including for habitats, birds and great crested newts. Further surveys are underway for dormouse and bats. Buffers from existing hedgerows, trees and ponds have been put in place to protect these habitats. In terms of landscape, site visits have been undertaken to identify the representative viewpoints towards the proposed site. As mentioned previously, these viewpoints have been agreed with East Devon District Council and 13 were selected in total. The LVIA or landscape and visual impact assessment will include assessment of impacts on landscape character and visual impact for residents, road and rail users and users of public rights of way. A landscaping plan is proposed to minimise visibility of the site. A noise assessment in accordance with industry standards will be undertaken upon the final site layout design. Solar farms are very quiet, and initial appraisals suggest that the site is sufficiently separated from the nearest residences to avoid noise impacts. Next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of flood risk, the proposed site is in flood zone 1, meaning that there's very low risk of flooding from rivers or the sea. A surface water drainage assessment is underway. No high voltage equipment will be located where there may be possibility of surface water flooding. Solar farms do not contribute to flooding, as the arrays are designed with gaps to allow surface water to be evenly dispersed and absorbed by a healthy grass sward underneath. The heritage assessment has comprised a desk-based assessment with site visit to consider the potential impacts of the development on designated and non-designated assets. A review of available evidence has confirmed that the study site has a low potential to contain non-agricultural finds and features from all periods. Following a review of the historic environment record and national and local lists, alongside a site walkover survey, no built heritage assets were identified that have the potential to be affected by the proposed development. We have mostly completed a geophysics assessment, with the remainder to be carried out in due course, and this is in full consultation with the county archaeologist. Finally, in terms of glint and glare, solar panels are designed to absorb light rather than to reflect it. They are considered safe to install close to airports and near major roads. The reflection from a solar farm is much less than commercial greenhouses, polytunnels, and even grass. From a distance, they appear in the landscape similar to a ploughed field or small lake. An assessment of potential impacts upon road, rail, residential, and aviation receptors will be undertaken upon the final site layout design. I'll now hand back to Chloe, who will talk through local benefits.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Chris. So as well as the enriched biodiversity that we have mentioned, there are also a number of local benefits which this solar farm could bring. So the solar farm will contribute over £1,000 in business rates to East Devon District Council every year. Jobs will be created during construction of the project and within the supply chain. There will be also ancillary benefits arising from contractors from outside the area, staying locally and using local services. We would like to hear from any local suppliers and contractors who would like to be considered in our tendering process, so please do get in touch. In addition to this, we are offering a community benefit fund of £350 per megawatt. This is index linked, and this is per year for the lifetime of the solar farm, which is 40 years. So this is to be spent locally on social and environmental projects. Typically, projects that have been funded by other solar farm projects include energy efficient measures on public buildings, play equipment and parks for children, and at one solar farm in a remote rural area, it even funded fibre optic broadband. So there's plenty of ideas that it could be useful. So for the 49.9 megawatt capacity that we're proposing, this could amount to around 17,500 a year, and for those 40 years that's £700,000 in total. So the administration of these funds will be managed locally, typically by the parish councils or an independent trust, and we welcome your suggestions for how this money could be best used. We also want to help infuse the younger generation and educate them on the importance of renewable energy. As such, we would like to encourage school visits to the proposed solar farm and educational sessions to local schools about the importance of renewable energy. So we use an experienced specialist who tailor their sessions to the national curriculum. If you are or know of a teacher from a local school who is interested in participating in this programme, then we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so timescales. So consulting with the local community is a very important part to us and a crucial part of getting our design right to then submit a planning application to East Devon District Council. So following our consultation phase, we will then look to incorporate the views of the local community and interested parties into our proposal and revise our designs if necessary and feasible. We will then finalise our proposed design and aim to submit our planning application in the next few months. East Devon District Council has already provided pre-application advice, and we will continue to work with the planning officer and specialist consultees once submitted to address any comments raised. After the application is submitted, the council will undertake its own consultation process and invite local residents to comment. Our aim is to submit a proposal which does not only comply fully with the local plan and the national planning policy framework, but also one which the local community can support. The planning determination period for developments of this scale can take anything from 13 weeks to 32 weeks, but we'd hope to have a decision towards the spring, summer of next year. If approved, we will look to start construction at the earliest by spring, summer the following year, 2023. If you would like to speak to us in person, we will be holding an in-person exhibition at Wimpole Victory Hall next Wednesday, the 20th of October. This will be held from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. If this isn't convenient and you'd still like to speak to us separately, then please do get in touch. So, question time. Thanks for listening to our presentation of our plans. We'll now answer any questions that you have. If you haven't already done so, then please do type your question using that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'll now read your question out loud, and one of us will answer. We do hope to answer all of the questions during this session, but if we are unable to, for whatever reason, then please do contact us. Okay, so first question that we've had here, how often do you anticipate having to replace the panels, and what happens after the 40 years you mentioned being the lifetime of the project? Chris, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yes, thank you. So it's a good question. So we don't anticipate having to replace the panels at all unless they are broken, and that shouldn't happen because the site will be secure with the deer fencing that encircles the development. There was a case study on a solar farm that where buzzards were dropping pebbles on some of the panels and that cracked them, and so the panels obviously had to be replaced. But in terms of the warranty and the expected lifespan of the panels, we fully expect that to be 40 years and plus. In terms of what happens after the operational period of 40 years expires, then the solar farm would be packed up, 96% of which would be recycled. And that will be imposed firstly as a condition by the council. So if the solar farm was approved, then the planning permission would be for 40 years, and we would have to clear up and reinstate the land to the condition that we found it in at the end of that term. And then secondly, we have agreements with the landowners that form part of this solar farm proposal that says exactly the same thing, that we need to reinstate the land to the condition that we found it in. So yeah, there's a very strict set of rules that we need to follow in order to go about doing that.
Great, thank you, Chris. A question here from Tony. Tony, you've asked, are there any proposals to manage rainfall runoff from the panel hard surfaces? So I think Claire might have covered this in her section, but just to reiterate, so the panels, they do have gaps in, so it distributes the spread of rainfall that hit the panels. We are also proposing to convert the arable land to a species-rich grassland, and generally the healthy grass sward beneath the panels is also what assists with the permeability of the land. I think it's important to note that it has been, solar farms do not increase any risk of flooding, and as Claire also mentioned, we are in the lowest probable flooding area, so yeah, it should be fine. I don't know if Claire or Chris want to add any more to that.
I'll just add that a full surface water drainage assessment is underway. Until we have the final site design, we'll then know the final sort of outcome of that survey. But once we have the final design, we'll know the total area of the panels, and the site will be modelled. If necessary, small scrapes or swales can be used as a drainage solution, but as I said in the presentation, there are actually small gaps in between the panels across the array. So the previous assumption that drip lines would form is increasingly shown not to be the case. So there are ways to manage if we find that surface water is sort of redirected somehow by the panels, but we don't anticipate it being a big problem.
Thanks, Claire. Tony, you've asked another question here. There are several deer resident in the area. Will any measures be implemented to reduce the impact on their lives? So as Chris mentioned earlier, and Chris, you can expand on this one if you like, the fence that we have included is a rural deer fencing. It is designed to stop deer entering into the site. That's for a couple of reasons. Number one, deer are quite large, quite bouncy. They will, number one, injure themselves potentially if they hit any of the panels, and also they may damage the panels themselves. We obviously have undertaken a phase 1 habitat survey, and that has incorporated mitigation measures for other wildlife as well. Claire or Chris, feel free to expand on the impacts on deers if you want to.
Just a quick one. The fencing through the site would largely encompass the perimeter, but as you saw in the photo montage on the public footpath, the fencing will be either side. So this leaves corridors for wildlife to travel through the site. So species such as deer that are larger and won't fit through the mammal gaps in the fence will still be able to commute through the area.
Thanks, Claire. I'll just go on to some other questions that we have here. One from Andrew Bratt. Thanks, Andrew. I've noted your comment here. Yes, we will be looking forward to meeting you next week, and we can answer any other questions that you might have then. A question here from Liz. So Liz, you've said that the land shown may not be the full extent of discussions with local landowners. Will this be designed in such a way that it can be expanded if further agreement is reached with adjacent landowners? Chris, you might be best placed to answer this quite clearly if you don't mind.
Yep, sure. Hi, Liz. So yes, the proposal that we are hoping to submit in due course is the final package, if you like. We aren't hoping to expand that at all. Yeah, we're content with the land that we're proposing to put panels on, and yeah, so I think we'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Chris. We just have one more question here from Andrew. Also questions ref construction phase, which can wait till we see you. Okay, no problem. Ambitions for biodiversity gain, how that we monitored, and whether independent organisations such as RSPB can be involved. Yep, we could chat about that then, but we are already engaging with local associations just to ensure that we are maximising our biodiversity efforts. So I think that is all of our questions that we have. We're happy to answer any more. If anybody has any, please come forward now and pop your question in. Otherwise, we'll finish the presentation there. I'll just wait a couple of minutes, a couple of moments.
Worth also just emphasising that we will be at the Wimpole Victory Hall next week. So if you don't have a question now, but you do in due course, then definitely we'll be very happy to answer that in person. Yeah, indeed. So thanks very much for your time. We will be grateful if you could complete a short survey. I'll be sending that round tomorrow. And if you have anything else you'd like to discuss, as we have previously emphasised, then please do get in touch. There's some contact details here. There's also contact details on our website, so please do that. And as Chris has mentioned, we are holding the in-person exhibition next Wednesday the 20th at Wimpole Victory Hall. We'll be presenting the same information as we have done on this webinar, and will be available to speak to in person. We hope to also have the mitigated predicted viewpoint photos available, but we'll also make these available
on our website and circulate them once we have those completed. So if you are watching the recorded version, you can find the feedback questionnaire on our webpage. Your personal details will not be passed on to any third parties and will only be used for the purpose of this public consultation. Thanks again, everybody, and have a lovely evening and good night.
Thank you very much.